I haven't like advertised.
Uh, yeah. We are live. Right, Ray. Dr. Energy herself, the one and only Dr. Ellen Wall. How are you doing, Dr. Wall?
I am excellent. I am so glad to be speaking with you all after not being here last week.
Yeah. And just a little programming note. We will be off next week. I will be out of town on vacation. And we are moving. The Ray family's moving, not the Wall family. The Ray family's moving. And so theoretically, we're going to be back on the 21st. But as we know, with moves, internet connections, all that kind of fun stuff, you never know. But theoretically, on the 21st, we shall return for that podcast. Dr. Wall, let's see here. I don't think this is in the notes for today, but I know some people were asking. So, do we want to hit the big old stuff from a few weeks ago because we missed that while we were gone?
Oh yeah, how did I forget about that stuff? We should definitely give that give that a mention before we move on to like $70 WTI.
Well, I just realized that as we're going live here that we didn't have that on there. So, anyways, so what are your thoughts on big old? We have Shell, Chevron, and Exxon. I'll let you pick which one you want to start with.
Well, so what was interesting was when all this stuff was coming out, I remember seeing two really good headlines. One of them made reference to the little engine that could. That was an article about the Exxon and engine number one takeover. I thought that was a particularly good literary reference. You know, anyone
Mhm.
who can reference a classic picture book definitely, gets two thumbs up in my court. And then there was another reference. I can't remember what the other one was. I think I was so impressed with the engine number, but it was another like children's story reference. I think maybe had to do with Shell or something. But yeah, that Exxon thing was so. One of the interesting things that I remember reading about it was that it seemed on the surface like it was some huge coup, and they're putting some. You think that they were putting like the founder of Greenpeace on the board, the
Yeah.
way that they talk about it,
Yeah.
but apparently like the people who are on the board are not like that anti-oil. Like they're actually like fairly middle of the road. I think the issue is more that like that kind of thing was never done to Exxon before, which is the idea that they did it, not that like suddenly these board members are going to turn Exxon into like a renewables company.
Yeah, so I think of the Exxon thing is interesting. I talked to someone, and I won't say their name, but their take on it is that these groups have had a hard time getting the legislation passed that they wanted, and so the route would be to just have influence inside the company, and then you kind of get your agenda passed that way. My take on it is a little bit different, which is if Exxon comes out and starts to say, "Well, we need this type of regulation." Congress will then capitulate, right? So that I mean, Exxon speaking in front of Congress is not something that it's not unheard of. So if Exxon starts to change their tune on certain regulatory matters, then you could get the government to work hand in hand with big business because that happens every day. So that might be they're a part of what's going on here, and not to make them a renewable company, but to cut out competition.
I mean, that's. I think that is part of the heart of it, and that's why all these big companies they're totally for the methane regulations. Like from the Obama, remember during the Obama era, there was
Mhm.
these methane regulations that got put in place, and then Trump basically was like, no, they're gone now, and now they're coming back. And the fact is that all the big oil companies could handle those. They had all the stuff in place, they could handle it, and they liked it because yeah, okay, so they have to spend money to deal with it, but they have the cash, they can afford it, and it really cuts down on the competition from the little guy. And of course, like the real issue we wish they would be dealing with is as opposed to like how do we just capture that natural gas and export it as opposed to like these very expensive regulatory measures. Yeah, we don't want to be flaring methane, but the best thing to do would be to
Well,
ship it.
according to Vladimir Putin, the EU does not want to buy that dirty fracked gas. So
You'd rather buy the dirty Russian gas. I
yes,
mean, what would you prefer? Dirty Texas fracked gas or dirty Russian conventionally produced gas? Is there really a huge? Does one like taste like a vodka or something? One tastes like vodka, and the other, what is like? I was gonna say bourbon, but that's really like Kentucky. So like,
yeah.
I don't know what.
yeah, maybe a little whiskey over here. I don't know. Of course, there's a certain person's name who I have to wait so long before I invoke because there's a Twitter debate. So I will wait to make those jokes until later in the podcast because
Okay.
it's become a recurring theme on Twitter. How long until a certain someone gets their day in the sun on this show? Okay, yeah. So let's move on. Speaking of, you said this a minute ago, WTI hits 70, Dr. Wall, and listen. 70 is a big number. That's a big number.
Yeah, I mean, that's what, like 5 years after you can file for Social Security?
Today, at least.
Yeah, not for us. We're probably never going to get to Social Security.
Right.
It'd be like 100.
But I mean, what's your read on the 70? Because it doesn't. So you have was it Novak comes out and says that the market's 1 million barrel per day undersupplied, but if you look at some of the economic indicators, it doesn't feel like the price and the storage really supports the price continuing to rise. What am I missing?
I think that we're seeing numbers that are reflective of demand certainly rising. I mean, we're definitely seeing better demand. It's not back to where it was. I mean, it's not, but we're definitely seeing growing demand. We're also seeing, I think it's reflective of the fact that OPEC did basically, I mean, I thought it was a possibility that they could increase production a little bit, or they could, but they basically decided to, increase production as per their schedule, which is essentially like a very small amount. So we have them, not acting to change all that much. You've got demand growing, and U.S. producers, yes, they're drilling a little bit more in terms of wells, but not significantly more. And so I think that we're seeing a price that's reflective of those fundamentals, but also the like exuberance, which I think may end up, and I think I would not be surprised to see this pair back. I mean, it like hit it and then went back down, but I think it's kind of like we keep going these like fits and starts, like up and then down and up and down. And one of the things I saw this on Twitter earlier today. Very interesting conversation. I'll try to retweet it so anyone who's following us there can see it, but about what's happening in China. And China is actually buying less oil. Both, why is this? There are a bunch of reasons. Definitely price is a factor. And so I wouldn't be surprised if, based on those kind of, like, we're already seeing, like, if China's going to buy less oil, that's going to slow the process by which the stocks are drawn down, which is really like OPEC is super into this. Like, we're seeing stocks being drawn down, and it's great. I think also the 70 reflects the fact that there was a bit of anticipation that we might see more Iranian barrels come on the market, and we're definitely not going to get that. Probably not until at least the earliest. It could be as early August, but some people were expecting that. So, I do. I mean, I don't like to make predictions, but I do think I would not be surprised if, like, we're not going to maintain it and keep going up. We're probably going to go back down, and then there'll be another period where it jumps up again. And it's like people who sew would like realize that there's a certain type of stitch when you sew where you kind of go forward and then you come back halfway and then you go forward again. And so you're constantly like kind of going forward and back. That's how I see this. And I'm not a sewer, so forgive my stupid sewing analogy. It was kind of stupid.
We need to get Mark Rossano on the show at some point, a friend of ours. He was on the China discussion. He was retweeting Giovanni Stanovo.
Yeah. Giovanni. I wish we could get him on the podcast. He's a really great guy. We've met in Switzerland.
Yeah, so Giovanni tweeted out that China crude imports were at 9.69 million barrels a day in May versus 9.86 million barrels per day in April.
That's what I'm talking about. Yeah,
and then there were 11.34 million barrels per day in May of 2020. So in May of 2020, they were at 11.34. In May of 2021, they were at 9.86. Now, Mark said the expectations was 10.1. I'm always curious about those expectations, how much weight you put in that. But at least the year-over-year number, that's a pretty substantial decline, going from 11.34 to 9.86, to your point about the China demand. And so I saw Nas was saying that he thought that OPEC is going to do its best to keep the price between, oh gosh, what was it, 68 and 74? Is that right?
Yeah, but don't let OPEC
68,
hear you saying that, because they don't look at price. They only look at the market.
So
just price.
Yeah, so I just keep getting torn over how much, because you look at some of the like the China numbers or some of the other numbers as far as where the oil is and how much is in storage. It seems like there's something that's doesn't exactly connect there, but they're not paying me for that, so who knows? But hey, listen, despite all that, options traders bet on $100 oil. Okay.
They're even crazier than Goldman Sachs.
Weren't we supposed to hit a 140 by summertime, which is like 2 weeks away?
I call Goldman Sachs if they're like $80 oil or bust by now. It's the end of Q3. Before it was like Q2. Now they're like, no, definitely by Q3.
Anyway. $100 options of $100 oil. Now this is how much, okay, to buy one option is one thing. How much do they put in options is a different story. But $100 oil, are we going to see it?
I don't think we're at $100 oil yet. I don't see it. It's not, demand is not back. Jet fuel is you'd think from some of the reports that like every single person in the United States is getting on a plane and flying somewhere else in the United States, but that's not actually the case. I think they said TSA screened not quite 2 million people recently, which is still like a 21% drop from where it used to be.
Well, and
here's like random summer weekend.
Here's some anecdotal data. So we are going on vacation. We originally planned to leave on a Sunday, and we moved it back to a Friday. And I got on the Hilton to the little place we're staying at, and I just extended my stay from Sunday to Friday. No problem. Now, think about that. This is summertime. This is going to the beach area. It's not like we're going to Texas, so it's not like the Florida beaches, but still, it's summertime vacation, and I just was able to extend my stay 2 days, 4 days out of my travel, or 5 days ahead of my travel. Like that's not typical of normal summertime vacation demand. Like when you see that, when people are traveling, you just can't extend your stay for 2 or 3 days. It's usually you got to find somewhere else, stay further away. So I don't think that people are getting out in masses like they had hoped for.
Yeah. I think it's like it feels like a lot because you're used to like not that much, but yeah, I think it's still down. I mean, if you look at gasoline demand, it's actually up a lot this week compared to last week, which is interesting because last weekend was like Memorial Day, big travel day. So, but yes, it's a huge jump, but that doesn't mean that it's back to normal. And I think that there's still a lot of hesitancy, and I think that there's also these issues of like lots of people still aren't working. And if you're not working either by choice or because you can't find a job, I mean, some people are not working because it doesn't pay to go back to work. They're not commuting. So it's not just like our families loading up the van and going to grandma's or going to the beach, but there's also, you have to consider like a lot of people aren't actually they're not commuting to work.
Yeah, no, that is absolutely right. It kind of caught me off guard because we said we had a shift in our plans. I said, I wonder if I can extend my stay for 2 days, starting on a Friday, which is like the day of the week for hotels. And they did. And just did it online, no problem. And I was like, wow. You're, that's, during the summertime, that's usually not, especially for this isn't, again, a popular spot, but it's also, it's not unpopular. So it was kind of surprising. So, for what that's worth, again, anecdotal data. Okay, U.S. conservatives stake claim to climate activism with Miami rally. Now, was this the rally that Trump had his pants on backwards?
I thought that was North Carolina.
Okay, is that North Carolina?
I don't think this has happened yet.
Okay.
Why do I know that? I shouldn't know that.
Did you see that picture? I keep seeing it. It's the funniest thing.
I saw some pictures of like wrinkled pants, but they were actually on backwards.
I don't know if they're backwards or not. It's so weird.
Oh boy. Oh boy.
Not back in our lives. for moments.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Oh, gracious.
This internet meme.
So will the American Conservative Coalition stake a claim, or is it too late?
So I saw this and I was like, okay, I get it. Like conservatives should have a climate policy. Like, why not? You should have a policy on whatever you want to have. But I was like thinking about this because a couple of years ago, I wrote a piece for Forbes about and I now I'm like blanking on the official name. It was something called I'm gonna look it up. It was about a carbon. It was this council, and they were promoting this carbon tax, climate like leadership council or something. Yeah, climate leadership council, and they had this plan to basically have like a carbon tax, climate leadership council, and this carbon tax, and it was supported by all these like old time like big GOP people like James Baker and George Shultz and like all the people that now, like people hate, the big names. And it was supported by Exxon, lots of big companies. And it was basically they were advocating for a carbon tax that also included a disbursement of cash to the American people, or they called it a dividend, which is basically just like a payout. And they actually stated in their plan that their idea was that they needed to have this dividend, not to like make it fair, because otherwise, the regular consumer gets harmed disproportionately by these things and they have to pay more. But because if they put in a payout from the government, it would be much harder to get rid of. Like they actually admitted, like, we need to do this so that it can't be taken away. And I was thinking, like, is that the Republican position? And I realized, like, that was a while ago. That was in 2017. So it was quite some time ago. Now, like, is anyone in America actually advocating a carbon tax other than like the like random like moderates that nobody really listens to anymore?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that was Obama's plan. Like Stephen Chu and Obama supported this plan, and now it's like, is the Biden administration going to supporting a carbon tax? No, they're not. They're like it seems they've gone like so much more radical. And so like then what's the conservative plan? Are they supporting this like kind of market-based stuff, or are they supporting something else? I don't really know. And so I think it would be interesting to see if they define it further, just because, I think this carbon taxing is really the biggest thing that we have from the Republican/conservative side, although I think most people would say like Baker and Schultz aren't really conservatives. I think it's evidence of how polarized, like the polarization of American politics has been extended to climate. Like if you wanted to do if the Democrats today supported a carbon tax, like full on, I bet they would get bipartisan support for it. But it's like they don't, because it's like nowhere near enough for them. It would be like, why would we do this? It basically won't do anything that we want. I don't know. What's your take?
Well, okay. To say that it's polarizing.
It's probably like an understatement.
It's a slight understatement. I think it's been called the greatest existential threat facing mankind like 15 times a day for the past, 10 years.
Wait, but I thought that was Corona.
That too. That also was the greatest thing. Can I this is an aside real quick. Can we all agree that no one believes in aliens anymore? Can we just all agree that?
Oh my God, no, aliens are real. Haven't you been following the news? Like everyone is now coming out and being like, they're totally real. Like there are like evident, like didn't some like Israeli like come out and be like, yeah, they're real and we've been like cooperating with them?
Okay, no one believes
Sorry.
no one believes in aliens, and I'm glad we can put this to bed, because if you did, and the Pentagon started saying that they're aliens, everyone I've seen Independence Day, people would be wigging out. Okay, there are no aliens, so that existential threat can go away. Now we got to deal with COVID. That's gone. Vaccines, thankfully, have saved us all.
Was COVID ever really an existential threat?
Well,
so the response to COVID, we could maybe qualify as an existential threat.
That we could. Now we're on to climate change. This is really tough because the climate change thing is so layered. You can't be you can't be in favor of nuclear, and then if you're in favor of nuclear, then you're against climate change somehow, or dams, or we've taken terms and we've conflated them. Climate change, or and that's the same as local environmental impact, or and so we don't really, when we talk about climate change, we don't even understand how we're using the term, because there is a reality that the pollution in China does have some impact on the U.S. How much, I don't particularly know, but pollution in a local waterway is considered climate change. It's like, well, that's not necessarily climate change. That's localized environmental damage.
That's like the local ecosystem. Like it's like
Right.
saying like we want to have clean air, we want to have clean water, like which are I think like very legitimate concerns.
Absolutely.
You don't want to live in a bad environment, and it should be on us and our onus to make sure that we keep our
Absolutely.
waterways clean. And but there's definitely this conflation of like a clean environment with climate. It's like plastic. It's like all the buildup of plastic and trash, and they're like, it's climate change. They're like, no, it's like keeping your ecosystem clean.
Right.
Not exactly. It's not the same.
Right. And so until we can parse out what we're talking about climate change, what all that does encompass and what that doesn't encompass, for general policy purposes, we're never going to get anywhere, because some of the initiatives, like the local plant, just pouring toxic waste into the local streams and rivers and water. Okay, yeah, that's a problem. I agree, that's a problem. That's not the same as trying to reduce carbon emissions in the U.S. because of the Paris Accords, but China's not compliant. Like those are separate issues. And so until we can kind of agree on that, we will do things, but we will not actually make real progress in the areas that we can. And that's the frustrating part for me. You're muted.
I muted myself. Plus, the best part about it is climate change is like the gift that keeps on giving, because you can continue to like claim that everything is climate change no matter what you're doing. It's like, it was one of the things, like, I think it's a thing that like this problem that advocacy groups have, because they want to advocate to say solve a problem. But once say you solve the problem, then your purpose as a group, unless you redefine yourself, ceases to exist.
Right.
So while they want to advocate and try to solve the problem, they also don't, like, they're not motivated to like solve themselves out of existence. So I sometimes think the same thing as like, not that we're like close to solving. I don't even think we really understand what is actually going on here. To be honest, I think there's still a lot to be studied in this, but it's this great thing because like it can never be solved, and you can claim that like weather is climate change, and anything is climate change, and like there's points to be gotten. So it's I'd be interested to see, like, I think that a lot of conservatives do care a lot about the environment. And so I'd love to see how they define their policy, because at least then you can say, okay, this is how the liberals, and we're not talking like Democrat and Republican are like different from the side, like you've got like Democrat and Republican, they've got like conservative and liberal, and they're like out here, and so I'm interested to see how they define this issue.
Yeah, I think, well, you're right. If you make the issue too small, you might can solve it. The other thing is, I think it was Chomsky said, I want the quote, but it's more or less, when you're going to have a slogan, put forth a slogan that everyone has to agree with, right? And so like so climate change is kind of that thing. We want to fight climate change. It's like, oh, okay, who doesn't want to stop climate change? Of course, that's not necessarily.
Yeah. It's like human rights. Everyone supports human rights.
Human rights, exactly. That's exactly right. And so I think it was him who had that. Has a quote about that, about when you're going to put a slogan out, make it where everyone has to agree with it on the premise. And the climate change, it used to be global warming, and that really struggled, and then it moved to climate change. And once you get by global warming, it's like, well, people could argue that the Earth being warmer is better. Anyways, okay, let's see here.
Not where I am. I don't think it get any hotter. It was like 116 the other day. That was quite enough. Thank you.
Oh, gracious. Okay. Square will invest $5 million to build solar-powered Bitcoin mining facility Speaking of Bitcoin, did you hear that El Salvador will take Bitcoin as legal tender?
Like for tourists and stuff. Right? Yes. I think I heard that there was, I knew it was a South American country, but I couldn't remember. So El Salvador, did they like have electricity? I'm sorry, that sounds really awful, but like, I know like it's not, I mean, like it's not, we're not talking like Belize, you know?
It's a poor nation. Well, so
Yeah.
I think it's interesting because so they're not detaching from the dollar, at least for now. If I were advising the people of El Salvador, what I would say is legalize it as tender, and then also I don't know what their immigration policies are, but also tell anyone if they come by whatever land, small land area requirements, you will give them citizenship and tax harbor immediately. Because
Oh,
what you want is these people who have Bitcoin, like real Bitcoin interest, and are afraid of the U.S. government or some other government cracking down. Like, give it to them now so they can come to your country. And if the U.S. does crack down, or China cracks down, or India cracks down, well, boom! Now these people will want to come to your country as a tax haven. And so that would be the next step. And
it
then,
would be. And private security too.
yeah, right.
I'm game.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and so if a bunch of of a bunch of rich billionaires or millionaires come there, they're going to want to invest their money at some point, whether it's tourism or whatever. So
Yeah.
I would
And
do that.
that would be like such a unique development strategy. I love it. Take
Yeah,
some like nation that really doesn't like and be like, hey, we are a Bitcoin billionaire haven.
there
Come.
you go.
We will like, yeah. And then
But to
I
your
mean
point
I
about
wonder
energy, though, that's also going to work on the energy problem, right? Because they will want to attract Bitcoin miners. They will attract so all of that stuff will begin to build out the ecosystem.
do you think that we are moving towards kind of this like dual like a, I mean I don't want to say like dual monetary system, but like as in like there will be countries that accept Bitcoin as tender and don't, you know, get you in trouble, like don't require extra like taxes and paperwork to use, mine, pay for, like have Bitcoin, and then you'll have like the other kind of like the other economies that don't, because I feel like the US is definitely moving towards the no by requiring like extra IRS file. All you got to do is say like, oh well, if you use or own Bitcoin, like we're more prone to audit you and you'll
Mhm.
scare away a lot of people. But I wonder if we're gonna kind of cleave into like the Bitcoin, like you know, like how we had like the capitalism and socialism blocks. We'll have the Bitcoin block and the like non-Bitcoin block, and be like U.S., India, and then you'll have the countries where they have like official Bitcoin. I wonder where they'll end up.
So
That'll be the third way.
yeah, I
The
would
new Cold War.
right. So I would suspect that if you're in an emerging market and you're looking around and the World Bank policies are not helping you, like they're of no use, then you need to implement the Bitcoin strategy immediately because this is a potential way to attract investors, corporations. Oh, by the way, the global tax corporation rate that's coming, you should also respond to cut your global tax rate at the same time. And so do
Oh yeah,
those
totally.
right. So to your point about this kind of this bifurcation, it would make sense if you're in an emerging market and you're struggling. Now is your chance to capitalize. Let the G7 lay the wood on taxes. You respond with a counter that says, okay, listen, this World Bank stuff hasn't worked for me. These IMF policies don't work for me. The Paris Climate Accords don't, all these Western ideals that are being forced upon me that are they're supposed to help, they're not. Let's try something different here. And so we'll see what happens with El Salvador. Obviously, they're they're gonna have to it's like with Mexico and had their energy reforms a few years back. It was a great idea, and then like 3 years later, they rolled it back. It's like, okay, well, so you're going to have to show people that you're going to be a stable policy with these type of with these type of changes. But I do think it's possible for what you're saying, which is that a block or whatever could spur off because India, the U.S., China, they're going to be a lot more resistant to this than maybe El Salvador or Honduras or Belize or I don't know whomever else.
I think it's actually I would love to hear from like some of the Bitcoin folk, and I know that a lot of them started following me when I went on the Great American Mining podcast. So if any of the people who are you guys are like really into Bitcoin, like chime in, tell us what you think about this idea that, we could kind of like would you up and move to like El Salvador for the sake of Bitcoin? I would love to hear from you.
Yeah, I'd be curious. I would be curious. Okay, let's see here. One more story. Asia hopes it can revive love affair with Iranian crude sooner than later. I did not know their love affair had ended. I didn't know that.
Their love affair with legal. They mean legal Iranian oil import. So I know the love affair is.
What's the Romeo and Juliet, the Montagues, and the
Capulets.
The Capulets. I thought it was like that, like they weren't officially allowed to see each other, but it was still happening.
Yeah, I was thinking maybe it's more like it's like Iranian crude became like the mistress.
Yes.
To like hide.
Exactly.
Like Romeo and Juliet, and since we're all about literary analogies for energy these days, I'm gonna go. I like the Romeo and Juliet analogy. Yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting because some interesting stuff we've seen from Iran recently. Tinker Trackers has some really interesting information about how they cut back on their exports in order to put more oil into storage because they thought that they'd be able to sell it legally really soon, which makes sense because why would you sell it illegally when you could make more money selling it above board? But now they're kind of in a bind and they've like filled up all their tankers and it's causing an issue. And if you're interested in more, you should definitely check out what Tinker Trackers is saying about this. But yeah, I think, but it's not just the Chinese. And I think that's why it says Asia, because India and Japan have both been very like adherent to the sanctions, and they are definitely interested in Iranian crude and condensate and all that stuff. I wonder though if India is going to try, when assuming this all goes down, if India is going to try to revive its negotiations to start up a joint gas field with Iran, because that could really make a huge difference for India in terms of moving away from coal power, which would be, I think, fantastic for them for a number of reasons. But, it was already running into so many problems before, it was like they were having so many issues getting it off the ground before all the sanctions. So I'm not sure that will survive. India may have like lost its appetite for if we're going with the.
There we go.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, Dr. Wall, we will run it a little short today. Anything else before we get out of here?
I don't think so. Catch me on investing.com later this week. And I think that's actually it in terms of where I'll be.
Okay. And I will be on Texas Guest Podcast. I did an appearance on the Energy Newsbeat podcast.
Ooh.
And then we will be live with Feeding the Dragon here in about 45 minutes. So we'll be back here. Same bat channel, different bat time. Okay. And we will be back. What did we say? The 21st. So assuming everything goes well, we should be back the 21st. And so you can follow at Energize Economy or at Ryan Ray Senior for those details. Dr. Wald, it was good to talk to you and to listeners. We'll talk to you 2 weeks from now.
2 weeks. Bye.